And hi, this program is coming to you with the hottest keynotes from 2026 for 2026. From 2025, 2025 was an astonishing year. In many ways, the global economy did much better than many people thought it would. AI models outperformed expectations, but however, enterprise AI adoption in many ways disappointed. We'll look into some of the forces that are guiding trends like that. When I talk about the great collisions, I talk about five vectors, the five vectors you can think of as bowling pins: markets, medicine, science, intelligences, and enterprise. If those are the bowling pins, the bowling balls are all of the disruptions that may be heading our way. The obvious ones are geopolitical factors, Gaza, China-US relations. The hidden ones, private debt and sovereign debt, are out of control. One of the days, 1 year, we'll have to pay the piper. Will that be 2026? It's hard to say. AI adoption hasn't gone as quickly as many people thought, although there are some stellar statistics on how well it's going some places. We have a K-shaped economy where, in fact, the numbers are not too terribly bad. However, consumer confidence is at all-time lows. Consumer debt rising quickly. Consumer delinquencies rising. So we have a funny economic picture. Who knows how that will unfold in 26? That'll be one of the bowling balls that hit the five vector bowling pin. So there's a lot to think about there. Let's get into what might happen in the keynotes. These are the five that I'm focusing on that clients are asking for more. The one that's the most controversial is why talking about culture change is a waste of oxygen and what works an order of magnitude better for AI. One that really inspires me is the hidden geniuses, how AI can uplift the bottom of the pyramid. We'll talk a little bit about wellness and EAPs and how AI can be detrimental to corporate wellness or can be an asset. You've heard the hype. Who's making money in AI? This is a talk about AI in the global economy. And then number 5 is how to use people-first adoption, adaptive adoption, my trademark model, to unlock enterprise value. Let's get quickly into it. One thing to consider is the leadership dimensions of AI. I don't talk enough about this, but certainly on the left-hand axis, you'll see efforts from the top: investment, commitment, motivation, inspiration, strategy, alignment. And along the x-axis, you'll see capability, the ground underneath which AI will either develop or not develop. So governance, infrastructure, people's capabilities, organizational silos, all of that nasty stuff. And so there are leaders who are very good at one dimension, leaders who are very good at another dimension. If you're very, very good at inspiring people and in investing from the top down, if you will, the left axis, but not so good at getting out of people's way, removing the blockages and what we call the frictions or the sludges in behavioral science, you'll be limited in the results you can produce. And there are also organizations where there's quite a lot of bottom-up empowerment, but not a lot of strategic alignment from the top. And that leads to a different kind of organizational chaos. One of the things that certainly leads to is inability to scale. And so we'll be thinking about how this affects AI deployment at your company and where you might be in this continuum. Which of these constraints along the horizontal axis you need to release or unlock? One of them people talk about all the time is culture. And I'm well known globally, he says humbly, for my efforts in culture change. I was ranked as high as number 5 in the world in culture change. So I say this, that most people don't know what they're talking about when they talk about culture. And it can be kind of a cop-out, like hands in the air, like, oh, we've got to change the culture. People rarely do change culture. One of the reasons people rarely change culture is they talk too much about values and not enough about behaviors. So in this talk, we're going to learn how to focus on behaviors, because that's what you care about. You don't care about having a culture of experimentation. You care about having behaviors that look like experimentation. Those are what are going to drive results. And so this talk will have a lot about the basics of behavioral science in a very practical way. It's like, what behaviors should we be focusing on? Which ones of those are going to be the highest leverage when it comes to our AI investments? Which ones are the highest leverage for innovation? Let's look at those. And so that's a talk on one of my great passions. In fact, one of the things I was hired by IBM to do was to help them build behavioral science into their management consulting model. Keynote number 2. This one really inspires me because we talk about how AI is empowering knowledge workers, the top of the K-shaped economy, if you will. And that's inspiring, and I'm glad I work in that space. Those are the people who I talk to day in and day out. But I'm also inspired how the billion or so people, or in fact it's 2 billion now, at the bottom of the pyramid can be uplifted by this new technology and how they can use it to make their lives better. But inside organizations, that's the part where I get invited most. I don't talk to many of those 2 billion people myself. And I'm interested in how we unlock everyone's potential so that everyone sees it as making their job easier, better, more interesting, and more fluid, contributing more value. All those things that people love to do. And so that's the stuff that I, in a sense, focus on. So we're going to learn about democratizing innovation, about realizing the untapped potential of everybody in the organization. We're going to use storytelling. We're going to talk about AI as a skill multipliers, a force multiplier, as people like to say these days. So I think there's a talk that will leave people both very inspired and some very practical things to do. We are going to talk about people first adoption. It's a term that I coined, I dare say, 2.5 years ago. How to put people first for two reasons. One, I think the measure of AI's success for the world will be how well it transforms and touches the lives of people, everybody, not just very few people. And the second thing is how people first adoption makes adoption go better. I've talked about some of those ideas in that 4-box diagram. Is how we take the people in organization and turn them into barriers. People love to talk about the barriers. Oh, the technology is great. People, that's a problem. Well, yeah, that's one way to think about it. But what's certainly true is that you need to work on people first. And that includes some topic that I'm very passionate about, is AI literacy. So what we'll learn in this talk is frictionless innovation, is getting out of people's ways. What are the bottlenecks, the frictions, the sludges, as we say in behavioral science? We'll also talk about putting some frictions in. Human in the loop is putting frictions in. You don't let the model just get on with it, but you have checkpoints and waypoints and ways of testing and validating along the way. And that's what everyone agrees you need to do with AI, because like humans, like its human masters, it can be fallible. But sometimes the stakes are high enough, so we don't want to allow those single points of failure throughout the AI process. So, moving on to keynote number 4, well, I think it should be number 3, talking about burnout and the AI wellness revolution. I have a new book coming out, Brains, Bodies, and Minds. There are 5 chapters in it. One of the chapters I think you'll love is AI as a therapist. Is it any good? There's some tragic stories about people using it and getting responses that aren't therapeutically sound, shall we say. But if you read the numbers, there's between 10 and 20 million people using it all the time for therapeutic advice, for self-coaching advice, for wellness advice. So if you look at that, we need to think about whether that's beneficial. And there is research, like in all the stuff that I talk about. I try not to make things up or speculate. So there is research right now that says whether AI is a good coach or a good therapist. And we'll look into that. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2 is AI a better doctor than your doctor? Again, controversial chapter. More AI is finding its way into the waiting rooms and then into the doctor's office. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? How to use AI wisely as a patient, and also how the medical profession is beginning to adopt it as a third chair in many clinical settings. We are also going to talk about, in the book, about GLP-1s, and not just as making people skinnier, but what the effect of that on the obesity epidemic might be on a societal level. We're going to talk about my peptide bro friends who are madly injecting all kinds of compounds in the name of longevity. They want to live to be 120 or 150. That's really going to become a thing in 2026. We want to talk about whether that's wise at all. Yes, there are ostensibly some benefits from growth hormone and something called BPC, but are we creating an error by jacking our adrenal system that hard early in life? And so those are some of the topics. There's also a diagram from the chapter A lot of people in the wellness world like talk about hormesis, how something that's bad for you can be good for you in small doses. It's also true that something that can be good for you can be very bad for you in large doses. And so this also applies to the AI world. And I always like the intersection of models and metaphors between these two worlds is something like that. Is there an optimal level of innovation, of technology development, of AI in your organization? And do we risk, because everyone talks about like more is better, and you have something like that asymptotic plateau where you start to get diminishing returns, but nobody ever talks about like how we get like really bad returns. And there have been some notable reverses in the AI world. We want to see if we are in this hormetic sweet zone. Moving right along from this, we'll talk about wellness programs, and we'll also talk about a phenomenon called bodily autonomy or libertarian biology, which is the stance basically that this is my body and the government can't tell me what to do with it, and nor can a doctor. I'll rely on my communities and my friends to empower me and to make better medical choices. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing right now. I have a position on it. You have to read the book to find out what that is. We're also going to talk about AI and the global economy, so navigating the AI stack. There's a lot of talk in 2025 about whether it's bubble. In 2026, we'll see, or maybe we won't. There's ways in which it is and ways in which it isn't. Certainly, we've never seen capex like this. Right now, $2 trillion a year, I think at the peak of some of the biggest infrastructure investments in global history, the U.S. highway system getting to the moon, 25 to 35 billion a year. Right? We're talking about trillions a year now. It's an order of magnitude different. Whether that's worth it, only time will tell. But there's certainly bubble-like characteristics, and there's also ways in which it's underhyped. I'm going to talk about those too. But one of the things true is this AI stack is from my talk on AI and the global economy. There's quite a lot of money being spent at the bottom. High bandwidth memory, tensor processing units, GPUs, chips, copper cabling. And what's going to need it for that to be justified is that there is money flowing in the top from the consumer and enterprise ecosystem. And whether the money coming in the top will justify what's being spent at the bottom. That's really the critical question for AI and the global economy. This is a very long talk that I gave to several boards this year, and I think we need to look in 2026 some of this squarely in the eye in order to make good strategic choices. And so some of the topics are the 2026 landscape, AI, ROI reality check, how to think about strategic pivots and the perils of the sunk cost fallacy, and so forth. So I'm Paul Gibbons, and thank you for listening to that. That was my manifesto. Goes along the lines of think bigger, think better, where we talk about getting out of the short-termism that our evolutionary biology wants us to consider survival, and how we can take a longer view of what we do as citizens, parents, enterprise leaders. I also think better is something that I'm passionate about. Systems thinking, scenario planning, metacognition, and critical thinking. Those are two dimensions of think bigger, think better. I take an abundance methodology, but not abundance at all costs. So ethical abundance is a framework that I talk about. And from self-efficacy, Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive, great 1970s hit, to species efficacy, we can do it. So that's the Think Better Manifesto. And here's a little bit about me. I'm best known in the world for culture change, organizational change. I've written 9 books, 6 of them are on that topic. Most notably, I was in Microsoft's Distinguished Author Program 10 years ago when my first book came out. I've been ranked as high as number 5 in culture change in the world. So where I really operate, my sweet spot is where artificial intelligence and technology meets organizational change. I've been a change expert for a very long time, and AI is the hottest and newest and in some ways most exciting thing, in some ways the most perilous thing. I operate in how to make best use of that, both as a citizen, as a parent, but mostly as an enterprise leader. Thank you for listening.